I was probably 20 when I read Naked Lunch,
Hmm.
and I had been looking for this freedom in my writing, a release, because everything just felt very structured. I was fascinated with Ray Bradbury,
Mhm.
who I still love very much, um, and John Steinbeck and Mark Twain. Those are my favorite writers when I was a teenager. Um, so when Burroughs came along, when I discovered that, it was just so free. There was no restraining in what he was writing. And I like to tell people that with every single book that I write, it really starts out like Naked Lunch. It's run on, it's messy, it has no plot whatsoever until I shape it, bring it back together. And then I do a thing with the dialogue that I call the Bukowski filter. I'm like, well, read that dialogue back to yourself and tell me, would Bukowski approve of that? Does it make sense? Because that's what I got out of Charles Bukowski was not just his honesty, but the way people spoke in his stories are the way that people speak. People of that,
Yeah.
of that level in society, they speak that way. And honestly, people misunderstand Charles Bukowski a lot. They think he's just some drunken guy writing about hookers.
Yeah.
The guy was really a Buddhist at heart. I mean, he had a Buddhist funeral. When he died, he was given a Buddhist procession.
Really? I didn't
Yeah.
know that one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He had a Buddhist funeral.
Yes, he had a Buddhist funeral. And if you think about it and you look back, you're like, well, he
Yeah.
was just living. He was living. He was living life as hard as he could, and that's it.
Hmm.
It's like he had his living happened to have had a lot of drinking in it and womanizing, but he was living. You know what I mean? He understood the bullshit of life, and he was living it the best way that he could, and that really shows in his work. It's just very honest and raw. Out of any almost any American writer, he was very honest um, in what he said. So those are the two guys that are huge impacts. Even to this day, I still look at them. It's like one on one shoulder, one on the other, looking at down at me as I'm writing, even though I'm not writing topically like they did. Maybe I'd probably write more like Bukowski than William Burroughs, but William Burroughs could really write a sentence and really create an image in your head. It's fantastic. So yeah, um, uh, I have the five B's: is Bradbury,
Hmm.
Burroughs, Bukowski, J.G. Ballard, and Paul Bowles, who wrote
Oh,
The Sheltering Sky. Those are,
and they're all great.
yeah, they're big influences on me. And there's women too that influenced me: Patti Smith and Kathy Acker, and even Yoko Ono's poetry was influential to me.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah.
Is Bukowski still that reputed with all the cancel culture in the US? Because he was a jerk, and there are people who wouldn't read his books because of his personality or things he did to women. How is he perceived these days?
Um, I was working at a coffee shop a couple of years ago. A lot of students from the nearby college would come there and hang out. A lot of self-professed feminist female students would come in, and I remember one she would always come in with a different Bukowski book every other week. I'm like, oh, you like this guy? And he's like, yeah, I mean, he's a little rough around the edges, but I got to see I got to see what's out there. Almost like saying, I'm learning about the a
Hmm.
toxicity that's out there through reading his books, which is okay. And I don't know that I've seen it called out a lot in cancel circles. And if anybody wants to ever challenge that, I present them with like, well, he was really a Buddhist at heart. If you read his later poetry, the stuff he wrote closer to his death, he was, you know, he didn't just write about drinking or womanizing. That's the thing. That's the number one thing. And he's still a hero to a lot of people here in America. And I know a lot of Germans too, because he was born in Germany, and
Yeah.
Europeans. So you have the people who may latch onto him and like, oh yeah, this is the drunken crazy guy. Oh man, you should read these stories. But there's a lot of heart in every single one of those stories. No matter what he's writing about, he spoke of the truest, rawest, ugliest things that we experience as humans. And on a personal note, when I was in my early 40s and transitioning out of relationships, I found myself in situations where I'm like, shit, this is right out of a Bukowski story.
Hmm.
So I felt that, and I wasn't like, oh, I'm so cool, I'm Bukowski. No, I was like, this is really messed up, and this is
Mhm.
like Bukowski. So that was my takeaway.
Yeah, 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 and that goes back to what you said, that writers should be able to express the human heart. That,
Yes.
let's say you are you are in the middle of a situation and you can relate to a book or to a movie, because or even to it happened to me, which is even more um, weird. I would say it's there were occasions where I felt I was part of a painting. Like I just look around and this could be a painting. This could be a representation of reality that really tells how human beings are, how we are wired, why we struggle, what we know and what we don't, and all the broken bridges between individuals. It's I had a couple of occasions like that. It's when your life is visual. When there
Yes.
are so much, the images started to erupt, around you, and you feel that you are part of a wider story.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of the title "Naked Lunch," when I think it was something Allen Ginsberg said to William Burroughs about when you look at the end of your fork and you
Mm,
see the thing that you are gonna consume. You see the reality of what that is. It's that same idea of expressing what it is to be alive. That's what it is. What it is to be alive,
yeah.
and
So
all your feelings.
yeah, it's all down to that, isn't it? Like what
It
means
is.
to be alive? What are we here for? How do you face finitude? It's in the end, it's all about that. Even though, if you think about all your problems, even like stupid problems with your neighbor, with your landlord, with the bus driver, they're all part of a larger image, or a larger picture, and it almost always communicates to how you feel about life. If you know what you are doing, or if you have few things that you are not sure about it, and how much are they impacting you. It's not just that. Like everything is related to everything.
Yeah, it's true, and we are all connected by the energy that's this planet. Um, and everyone has their own story. Everyone has what their own struggle, and that's what defines us as individuals. Um, and some people can write it down, and some people can't, or some people find other avenues to express it. Like I don't. I like crime books. It's not my number one go to for reading. Um, and somehow I fell into that genre. But then my idea when writing is, okay, I've got these characters who are in search of a plot. So I kind of know what a book is going to be about when I start writing it, but I let the characters figure it out. And in all of my books, they have to be character studies, because that's what makes it rich for me. It makes it realistic. It's the kind of books I like to read.